Welcome to Detroit's Darkest Times. Today's segment is going to be on the Board of Education in Detroit City. And we're going to get into some past history of the Detroit Public Schools, the present history of Detroit Public Schools, and things of that nature. So before we get started, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, hit the like, and the notification bell. Also, you can share these videos if you like. And you can tell a friend to tell a friend about Detroit's Darkest Times. Grow with our channel. Support our channel. And be a part of the team. The winning team. Also, if you want to support in another way, we have Cash Out. That's money sign FC313. We have PayPal, DDT313. If you'd like to support in that way. If you're not able to support in that way, just support by subscribing, hitting the like, and the notification bell. We got a lot to unpack today about the Detroit Public Schools. And way back when I used to go to school with my siblings, my friends, in the wintertime was, and now that I think about it, in the wintertime was really a crazy situation. But back then, when we was going to school, we had like a foot of snow or better. We'd walk to school, and this is a number of blocks we'd walk to school and back home. And a lot of times on the way back home, a lot of people would make them snow angels because you knew you was going home, so it wouldn't be too bad to get, cold and wet, because that's what would happen when you make snow angels on the ground. But we used to do that and have snowball fights and just all kind of stuff and having fun. But at today's time, I think about all the stuff we did, like walking in the massive snow to go into school and 0-degree weather and things like that. It's just crazy to think about it today. But these are things we used to do. We had a lot of fun. We didn't complain. We didn't think nothing about it. Walking to school with all that snow, it was just like a everyday thing. And very suddenly your school would close because you're talking about Detroit City. It's just flat land. It's got street lights everywhere. And the weather just really had to be out of this world for the schools or for transportation to shut down. And don't get me wrong, that has happened in the past. But, but it's not like in the South or anything like that where if you get like an inch of snow, everything's going to shut down because you got a lot of hills, you got a lot of ditches on the side of the roads that your car can slide off in. Or you can slide off the road. It's got a lot of curvy roads. It's got a lot of mountains. So it's a lot different from the south to the north. But I just wanted to, and we had a lot of fun, to be honest with you, coming up and going to school and stuff like that. We had a lot of fun and doing all different types of things. But that being said, we want to get into the story and the past history of Detroit public schools. And after we do the history of it, we're going to also do the present time, what's going on today's time in the Detroit public schools. But back in the day, the Board of Education decided they was going to, you might think this is crazy when you hear it, but the Board of Education in Detroit City decided they was going to rob let me say that again. The Board of Education in Detroit City back in the day decided they was going to rob the school system. And what I mean by that is they decided they was going to start using the funds that they get for Detroit public schools for their own wealth. And I'm going to tell you some stories that happened. But after you get done watching and listening to this video, you can also do your research on it. Because at Detroit's Darkest Times, we don't put no fairy tales on this channel. It's all real, all legit. So that's one thing you can count on when you subscribe to Detroit's Darkest Times. The things that you hear or the things that you see is going to be 100% legit, no fairy tales, nothing like that. So back in the day, they decided to, and it was a group of individuals, but it wasn't everybody, you know what I mean? It was just people that had authority, basically, and with the funding. And, you know, once the city got robbed by some other people, we ain't even gonna get into that. You can Google that Detroit City being robbed by government officials years back, and you'll get the information off the internet because all this stuff really happened. But we wanted to do a segment on Detroit public schools to let you know the past history, and then we also going to let you know the present time that's going on in Detroit public schools. So these group of individuals decided they was going to rob the Detroit public schools. And they just wanted to, you know, a lot of things happen. I don't want to get off track, but a lot of things happened in the past in Detroit City. And a lot of people did some crazy things years back. You know what I mean? And, but, you know, what really takes the cake is everything was going to hell in Detroit City back in the day. And it was just like every man for himself. Which you had groups that was together also, but it was like every man for himself and just get what you can get when you can get it, things like that. And that's what kind of went down. You know, the city being robbed. And basically the city robbed itself. And what I mean by that is everybody was doing something. But the high-ranking officials that run the city at the time in question was doing crazy things, And basically it just all boiled down to some people didn't even really need to do that, and it was just a situation where greed got a hold of them. And that's, it just fell in their backyard, you know what I mean? But then you had some individuals, like regular individuals on the streets, that really was having a hard time, so they did have to do whatever they had to do to survive, And not condoning doing anything wrong or anything like that, but it's just the way it was back then, People were just off the chain. But we're not gonna get into the city being robbed. You can we got a segment where we talk about that. You can look it up on YouTube, or you could just Google and check the history out of Detroit, and you can find out more about what I'm talking about. That way, you know that what you're hearing on this channel is legit and it really happened. You know what I mean? But that being said, they decided they was going to use funding to enrich themselves and things of that nature. Some people got caught, some people didn't get caught. Because, when things like that go down, you can catch certain individuals. There's some people you just ain't going to catch. You know what I mean? And you just can't catch everybody involved. You try to get the biggest proportion that that was involved in it, but you really just, it's hard to just actually get everybody in a big conspiracy to commit robbery and stuff like that. But we're not trying to open no old wounds, but we're just trying to give you the rundown on Detroit public schools. And that way you can get an idea of what went down years back in Detroit City. So they had a shit ton of schools that was abandoned, that they were getting money from the government, and it just acting like these schools are in operation, and they really wasn't. They was actually condemned, And that's why if anybody's did any videos on YouTube of Detroit City, when they go through the city and see all the abandoned houses back in the day and all the abandoned schools and all that, this has got a little bit to do with that. Not with the houses so much, but with the schools. And so these schools were, a ton of them was abandoned schools, and they would get money for them. They were just using the money for their own wealth. And they was doing some of the craziest things, you know what I mean? And, but anyways, they got this big warehouse. They bought a bunch of motorcycles and all different kinds of stuff. A shit ton of BlackBerry cell phones. And they had all this in the warehouse, And so basically they did a massive robbery, and they did some stupid things with why they were spending the money that did not belong to them and things of that nature. But that's just a few things that they did, and they got confiscated and everything like that. And it's just, I don't know what they're doing with the BlackBerry situation. I guess they thought that was the only cell phone that was ever going to come out or whatever. And I guess they thought maybe they can sell them over time or start a BlackBerry business or whatever the case may be. It's just the people that did this and that was involved in this was not the brightest people in Detroit City, by no means. But anyways, and you know who you are if you're listening to this. But anyways, they just doing stupid shit like that. And basically stealing from you might as well say stealing. They were stealing from the government, yes, but they was also stealing from the Detroit citizens that lived in Detroit City also. And but anyways, they was like, collecting money for abandoned schools, acting like they was in motion, and stuff like that. And just using money for things that they wanted and they bought and the way they was living and stuff like that. It's just mainly greed because they was all making a fairly decent wage, and it was just greed to the fullest. And when the government cracked down on this, because the government got involved because the city actually filed bankruptcy, and then they had to go in there and investigate to see why they ain't got no money to run the city, why ain't they got money to run the public school system that the government's providing for them. So I think after this blast back in the day, I'm sure they checking out every city, from then on out to make sure that they ain't just getting robbed and stuff like that. And they find a lot of corruption over time and stuff like that on different scenarios. But we just focusing on Detroit public schools. But it was just a crazy time. And back in the day, the schools that was in operation, they had a shortage of teachers. Some teachers wouldn't even be in the class. They would, the students would just go to class, have to stay there for the whole hour, and then go to their next class. And in some classes, there wasn't even a teacher available. And I don't know if this was just, I can almost bet it was because of the funding, to be honest with you. But because of all the chaos that was going on with the robbery of the Board of Education's money and all this. But this thing was happening. Then you had a shit ton of teachers that was trying to do the right thing and educate kids. And then you had a shit ton of teachers that was just there for the paycheck and didn't give a shit if the kids learned or not. And that's real talk. It might hurt the feelings of some people, but you know who you are. You know what I mean? If you're listening to this, you know who you are. But we're not going to say it was all teachers because that wasn't the case. There was a lot of good teachers, and a lot of teachers back in the day meant well and tried to do their best to teach the students. But we had some ranky teachers also. So we just have to put it out there because we keep it real here on Detroit's Darkest Times. And, we're not going to sugarcoat anything. It's just the way it is. And the truth be told is the best thing to do is just tell what really happened and, tell the truth about the situation. But anyways, these people were robbing and stealing and, kids getting cheated out of their education because, like I said, some teachers wouldn't even in the class. And then you had, you did have a lot of students that was there to learn, and then you had some students that, went to school just for recess. You know what I mean? So that was a reality also. But we're just talking about the Board of Education, that they was, stealing the money that the government was funding for all the Detroit public schools, and they were just using it for their own wealth. And it was a sad time back in the day, not for them until they got caught. But before they got caught, they was living large and spending all the money and, things like that. And then they did have a lot of parent-teacher conference where people gather, the parents gather and say the issues they had. And, basically they had it, but they wasn't doing anything about it. And then finally, I think some parents actually got a hold of the right people and reported all this. And I believe this is how the investigation started with the Detroit Public Schools and what they uncovered when they was doing it. And this is all public information, so you can actually look it up and do your research, But we're just doing a segment on it. And we was part of it, not part of the robbery, but part of the public school system in Detroit City and things of that nature. So we know firsthand, what went down and all that stuff. And that's why we're sharing it here on Detroit's Darkest Times. But it was just a crazy time, and you can leave your comments below if you like, and put your thoughts in, what you think. Make sure you hit the like, get the likes up, and things of that nature. But this was just unbelievable. And some people that's hearing this probably won't believe it, you know what I mean, until they actually do their research where they can actually see what's going on. But like I said, we don't put no false information on Detroit's Darkest Times. It's the real deal, real legit. We keep it 100, and we expect you to keep it 100 when you put your comments in. Just keep it real, keep it positive, and tell us what you think. What's your thoughts? But that was just a crazy time. And finally, with the investigation stuff, a lot of people went down and stuff like that. And then they've been working on getting the Detroit Public Schools squared away from that point till right now. And still today, the Detroit Public Schools are recovering, and they got 106 schools in Detroit City. So it used to be a lot more than that, but now it's just 106. It's 78% students graduating per year. And this is present time right now. The Detroit district serves 48,000 students over 106 schools in Detroit City. Test scores are below state average. In Detroit, at the present time, the population is 633,218 to 639,111. Crime rates down in Detroit City. That's a plus. Public transportation, they're asking for $20 million increase from original funding for public transportation. We're going to say roughly there's 24,000 boys in Detroit public schools and roughly 24,000 girls in Detroit public schools. The top high school in Detroit City today is Cass Tech. The top middle school in Detroit is Bates Academy. The top elementary school is also Bates Academy and Chrysler Elementary. There's 38 schools in Detroit City that has hearing impaired classes, down from 60 schools. Some students drop out at 9th grade or in the high school era to go to work or whatever the case may be. We do not recommend this, but the law says with permission, students can quit at the age of 16 to go to work in the workforce or start their own business. But we recommend at Detroit's Darkest Times that you go complete high school, get your diploma. It's very important. Education is very, very important for the future. So make sure that you get your education. You know, and a lot of people's fortunate enough to go to college. Some ain't. But at least get your high school diploma. It's very important. And we just want to let you know that right now, Detroit public schools are striving to do well. The city is striving to come back, which they're making all kind of positivity comebacks in Detroit City. So it's a plus from what it was years back. And you could do your research on the history of Detroit City and the present time of Detroit City, and you can see what I'm talking about. But I didn't want to do a segment on Detroit's Board of Education and Detroit Public Schools without letting y'all know the past history of what happened and then the present time, what I just told y'all in Detroit Public Schools. But here at Detroit's Darkest Times, we love Detroit City. We love Detroit Public Schools. We back all students in Detroit Public Schools. And we hope you do well. We hope you graduate. Stay positive. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Help someone in need when you can. And be a part of Detroit's Darkest Times on YouTube. We really appreciate y'all listening. Thank you. We're out.